And now, from Doug TV International,
I'm Edgar Gerrans.
And I'm Doug Farron.
And this is
Too
Real.
Hi, and welcome to this week's show. Today we're going to finish a conversation that Edgar and I had last week about drawing. Edgar's in Kansas this week taking care of some family business, but he'll be back next week with some fresh input. But at the end of the show last time, we mentioned Martin Lang, who had written an article about how drawing is bad for students to learn. Edgar and I both believe that it is essential for students to learn to draw. I believe it's not important because it's traditional, but more because it is the only non-mechanical way, that is without a camera, to express ourselves about the world around us. Many instructors today are discouraging learning how to draw. Certainly, I don't believe that there is only one approach to making art. If people want to devote themselves to making non-representational art or abstract imagery, that, of course, is entirely up to them. People have accused us of being art fascists, and that what we're really saying is that there is only one way to make art, and that we believe that you have to be some kind of neo-traditionalist, or what you're making simply isn't art. That is absolutely untrue. I believe that my work, for example, is as modern and contemporary as anything out there, and that my painting has more in common, say, with the way Larry Rivers painted than with the way Rembrandt did. And that in 100 years, people will look at my work, they'll look at Edgar's work, they'll look at anybody's work who is doing more than copying earlier styles and techniques, and we'll be able to recognize it as something that was done either in the late 20th century or the early 21st century. I have no doubt. But Edgar and I plan on talking about how our work, how the work of other realists fits into today's contemporary art world, and what exactly defines modernism today. So, like I started to say, we're going to talk about that in future episodes. So people insist that we are cranky old fascists who say that only one thing is art. That is not true. Edgar, for example, is a fan of Picasso. I like Mark Rothko's work. I like Robert Rauschenberg's work. I like some of de Kooning's work. There are a number of modernists who we appreciate. I'd also like to add that the four artists I just mentioned were excellent draftsmen. And in learning to draw, you will be able to decide what you want to do as an artist and how you would like to express yourself from a platform of being informed and from a platform of knowledge, and not from a platform of ignorance. Edgar and I have both heard many, many people complain, and sometimes bitterly, that they did not have the opportunity in art school to really learn what they needed to learn to make that kind of decision, to learn how to draw and to learn how to paint from the live model. Neither I nor Edgar have ever heard anybody complain that they could draw too well, or that they were resentful because they had to draw the human figure from life, and that somehow that was an experience that turned them into something they never wanted to be. We've, both of us, only ever heard the opposite, that they didn't get a chance. And if you don't know how to draw, you will only ever be deciding what you can do with the very limited toolbox that you've been given, and not what you want to do as an artist. So that being said, let's jump right back into the conversation that Edgar and I were having last week.
Andy Warhol could draw. He
He
could
could
draw
draw
beautifully.
amazingly well.
And he drew his whole life.
Yeah, I was surprised when I first saw his drawings. I thought, wow, I didn't know he could draw. I just thought he said snarky stuff and had junkies to his studio. No, but he drew incredibly well.
one interesting thing about Andy Warhol, who I consider a visionary in many ways, he was ahead of so many trends and so many things that were happening in society. And one interesting thing about Warhol is that he donated half of his estate to the New York Academy of Art. And the New York Academy, when it began, was very strict, and it was back to the type of training where you had to earn your way to color. And that's the training I had starting at 14, where I learned to draw before I put on color, before I went to oil paint. You had to get your drawing skills in order. And then you progress. I progressed to pastel. Then
and remember, they all progress together. You don't have to be Leonardo to start painting, you know.
And so I think Warhol saw the way things were going and the way things would be going, where that whole aspect of art training was being eliminated. And at this point, it's almost entirely eliminated from most art schools. And regrettably, the students have to go outside of their art school to draw.
Yeah, yeah. And in fact, Edgar started posting on Facebook about 4 years ago about how neo-modernism was pretty much taking down art education. And I started chiming in about a year and a half ago, maybe. And one of the responses I got was, well, if they don't get drawing at art school, then they can just go take it somewhere else. And I said, you know, why the fuck should anybody have to go to art school and learn to draw somewhere else? It's just, you know, yeah, I'm going to music school, but I have to take music lessons, you know, over with old Mrs. Grundy or whatever. You don't know. If you go to music school, you can't get in if you have no interest in an instrument or playing.
It doesn't make any sense. And if I ask a musician, if I meet a musician, a question might be, what instrument do you play? In academia, you will find a lot of these professors who cannot draw, and they're proud of it. They think it's some weird sort of strength.
Yeah, they think it's a feather in their cap. It's bizarre.
And they disparage students that come in there and they want to draw, they want to learn the skills, they want to learn how to draw what's in front of them, how to paint what's in front of them. And they're openly discouraged. I hear this all the time, and this isn't something that I've invented.
No.
You hear it also, too, from students.
Well, Edgar posted a post by an English professor a while back that I'd like to read.
Speaking of academia.
Yeah, speaking of academia, now this guy's pretty well known. Martin Lang, he's friends with Tracy Emin, who's a really big deal in conceptual art right now, and he's had a couple of big shows and gotten some big criticism, and so after Edgar posted this, I started looking into his work, and the guy, once again, can't draw his way out of a paper bag, you know. But he says that life drawing was developed. These are the words of Martin Lang. Life drawing was developed as a pedagogical tool to train Western artists to make figurative painting and sculpture. The reason that it still exists in some art schools is mostly down to tradition. While life drawing may be useful for some types of artists, it is not applicable to all. I am not saying that its teaching necessarily prohibits the development of good, exciting, and relevant artists. My argument is that it is not necessary and does more to hinder the development of such artists than it does to encourage them. To teach it is to enforce a hierarchy, bad hierarchy. Representation over abstraction, traditional forms of art over more avant-garde kinds. And I just want to say for a minute that when Edgar and I went to the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts, probably at least half the people were doing abstract work. It wasn't one or the other.
And most of our instructors were abstract expressionists.
Yeah, and some of them weren't, and we obviously learned most from the ones who weren't. But one of my instructors, I was very surprised, Murray Desner, he gave a hell of a crit. He gave really good critiques of realist work.
He was great. I still remember a lot of what he said, and the abstract painters, the teachers, they still had respect for representational work. They would critique it.
They absolutely did.
We were not discouraged, as they do now. We were not discouraged from pursuing this.
No, not at all. So to go on, embedded within this hierarchical and authoritarian position lies a reaction in conservative politics. Nostalgia and fascism have always walked hand in hand. Think of Mussolini harking back to the Roman Empire, or Hitler's love of classical art and architecture. Today, we might think of Trump's slogan, "Make America Great Again," and Brexit talk of taking back control. We urgently need free-thinking artists able to critique. We urgently need free-thinking artists able to critique contemporary nostalgia, populism, and even outright racism and sexism. For that, we need a pedagogical approach that is progressive, inclusive, and libertarian. This will allow for more progressive forms of art to develop and emerge, including non-Western kinds. For these reasons, I am against the teaching of life drawing. Now, I'm a fairly radical Democrat, and I'm not opposed to most of the political notions he talks about, but to think that I became, a right-wing fascist because I learned how to draw is so absurd. I don't know. I mean, most artists are, I don't want to say what most artists are, but I don't want to get into politics, but, I know plenty of Republican artists who are decent, but it's just to think that the learning of life drawing, all it's going to do is make you learn how to draw. It's not going to give you a bias toward loving Trump or loving Obama or anything else.
Well, the thinking of Martin Lang and people like him has been instrumental in England in removing life drawing from all 5 of their top schools.
All 5. So I wrote back to Martin Lang. I don't know if he read it or not. I invited him to. To continue to see representationalism as conservative is perhaps the biggest crock of horseshit of all being shoveled into the minds of today's art students. To begin with the assertion, and it goes without saying type assumption, firstly that figure drawing is conservative, and that anyone who wants to do it is conservative-minded, is entirely antithetical to modernists like de Kooning, who place drawing skill at a premium. Then to assert, as this jackass does, that drawing is embedded in authoritarian thinking and a thing of the past. Lang says traditional forms, but what he means is so vague that he leads one to assume that he simply means all forms of art that include drawing and happened pre-Picasso, that is, art of the past, and then to draw the conclusion from those already weak arguments that all value placed in practices of the past is mere sentimentalism is so logically flawed that it's hard to imagine any discipline that considers itself academic tolerating it. Lang says, it is also to deny art's radical potential. Must art activists first learn such conservative lessons? Embedded within this hierarchical and authoritarian position lies a reactionary and conservative politics. Neo-modernisms need to continue seeing itself as radical, even though it is today's tired status quo whose radical efforts have led it into endless and mind-numbing repetition of exhibits that lack any individualism whatsoever. To continue to see representationalism as conservative, that this kind of weak-minded rhetoric has gained any traction with today's young students so pisses me off. Below is a photo of Hilary Hahn, this was on a post, a major star of the contemporary music world. She is Mozart brilliant, and when she was 17, already a graduate of Curtis, she was accepted into Curtis at age 10. She released her first album. She won a major award for one of her own contemporary compositions and funds a project in which she commissions dozens of other young contemporary composers to write more. She is the definition of a modernist musician. She plays Bach every day. She says, "Bach is, for me, the touchstone that keeps me playing honest." By Martin Lang's yardstick, that makes her a hopelessly conservative, sentimental fascist, and not the modernist, one of the foremost musical modernists writing today, that she is. And drawing keeps me honest. I mean, it just keeps me fresh, you know? It keeps my eyes looking and seeing the world in a way that maybe most people don't. Or
you have the figure in front of you, and you're creating something that's relating to that, and it's a process, and it's central to the thinking of most artists.
And it's a way, and it's a means of discovery. You know, when I do a drawing, I think, wow, this might make an interesting painting, or, you know, if this figure were with another figure, or whatever, however you're thinking, whatever kind of associations you personally make, you know, drawing can really help you lead to that. And I may hasten to add that drawing is incredibly good for your memory.
There's studies that if you write something down, you remember it better than if you just read it. So there's a process that happens. You're
drawing as well.
With drawing, yeah, you're taking the world in front of you and putting it down on a piece of paper, and it's being filtered through your mind, through your experiences, through all of these things, and it's also a process that builds on itself. You learn how to turn form. You learn the figure. You learn proportion. You only learn by doing it.
Yeah, I used to, when I first started at the academy, they put me right into the studio classes because I'd already done my foundation up in Boston, and I would draw and paint the figure 6 hours a day, and then I'd walk home and eat some dinner and trudge all the way back to the academy. It was about 2 miles from my apartment, and go back for 3 hours more. And I remember Homer Johnson's croquis class. A croquis is a very quick sketch of the figure, 2 minutes or less.
And they're amazing. And it's something that when I teach drawing, I always start with croquis.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of things that happen when you do a croquis, a 1 or 2 minute gesture drawing. For one, it loosens you up. It's like a athlete stretching. It loosens your arm.
It's exactly like that.
It loosens. And the other, one other really important aspect, models love it, and they go into poses that they could never hold for 20 minutes. So you're drawing things that
these really athletic poses, and just like Edgar said, things you'd never see if they were holding a longer pose.
There's no way I mean, I've seen models stand on 1 foot, all kinds of fantastic poses, tumbling off the platform, and I've talked to models, and they really enjoy it. It's a way for them to show their skill sets.
And I also wanted to say, though, about Homer's class, he would do a half hour of having the model move. And I mean, I would go through pad after pad of paper, but it did more good for my drawing. And you know what else really, really helped my drawing? When I was in Boston, I had these 2 instructors, Patsy and Andy McMillan, and not only did they teach extracurricularly a portrait class at night, which was incredibly helpful, they also, Andy was the sculpture teacher, and he learned from a guy who went to the academy. His name was Demetrios. Pat Connors and I looked him up one day. And Demetrios's thing was moving the model stand every 15 seconds, turning it a quarter turn. When you first started
That's
sculpture.
fantastic, yeah.
So you're blocking it in, and you're constantly drawing, because the only way you can make a sculpture happen like that is to turn your sculpture 90 degrees and draw the contour. You're constantly drawing contours, and hundreds and thousands of them. I'm so sorry that we didn't have cell phones back then, because I have no record of any of it.
Well, I remember the sculpture class I took at the academy. We would sculpt for 3 hours and toss it, and
Yeah, just tear it down, throw it back in the clay bin.
and sculpting helped drawing. Sculpting gave you
Almost more than anything for me. I mean,
and again, from life, you can't sit and make a sculpture from photographs.
Andy and Patsy both did it when they were teaching figure drawing. They'd say, see the whole figure at once, see the big shape. And they had actually made at home these huge cotton bags. They'd put it over the model, so all you could see was the big shape.
Oh, that's that. Yeah, there's a technique called enveloping, right? Where you draw the bigger shape first, lightly, and then you put the figure within it.
Yeah.
One thing I was thinking about too, you take something fundamental like a standing figure. When people are learning to draw, the figures are always falling over. They're not.
They don't have a sense of gravity to them.
And the feet are in the wrong place.
Yeah.
So when that's another thing that you learn when you're working from life. A teacher will show you what a plumb line is. And a plumb line is basically, it's a string that you have a weight on the bottom. And I have students just make it out of kneaded eraser. You just take a kneaded eraser.
You can buy them at the hardware store.
You can buy them, or you just take a kneaded eraser, a piece of string, you hold it up, and that's a perfectly straight line. And then you look at the neck, or look at something in the center part up by the head, run the line through and see where the feet stand.
Right.
And just that alone, you're learning something about drawing, but you're also learning about balance, and you're learning about how things that could be applied to so many things in the future, to engineers, to architecture. There's so many applications to that, where you learn how someone stands, how the weight is distributed through the figure, and how it's not. When it's drawn wrong, the figure feels like it's falling over. Yeah. And one thing about using a tool like a plumb line, after you've used it 100 times, 1,000 times, then eventually you can eyeball it. You don't even need the plumb line anymore. You've learned the fundamentals of how does a standing figure not topple over.
Yeah, and I've had days, I'm sure you've had them, every artist probably has. I still measure occasionally and use the plumb bob and all that. But some days I'll just forget to do it, and I'll just start drawing. And then I'll go back and I'll see, how'd I do? And there are days when I can just do no wrong,
No, I know. One of the real mistakes, I think, with art training now is they've somehow tried to make art easy, to make it intellectual, to make it easy, to make it something that you're just thinking about. Whereas every artist I know works really hard. I never became an artist thinking it was going to be easy. I didn't think I'd just be able to take some garbage, throw it on the floor. And I reject that completely.
This has been Too Real. I'm Doug Farron.
And I'm Edgar Gerrans.
And I hope we see you again here next week, when we will be talking about Clement Greenberg and his influence on the language of modernism and on the rise of it in general. Too Real is a production of Doug TV International and was recorded in the Barebones Studio in the Frankfurt neighborhood of Philadelphia. All material copyright Douglas Farron and Edgar Gerrans, except music copyright Douglas Farron. All material copyright 2019. I had a hard time getting a hold of Cephas this week. He's up in New York City, but I finally did, and the bonus feature will be up Monday, so keep your eyes open for that. Thanks for listening, and until next time, hey, Edgar.
Yeah.
What time is it?
Time to destroy modernism.
Yeah! This has been a production of Doug TV International.